November 23rd, 2016, Canadian, Texas. 18-year-old Tom Brown is out cruising with friends the night before Thanksgiving. When he says goodbye to the last buddy at 11:15 p.m., he takes his car and fills it up at a nearby convenience store and still has plenty of time to make it home by his curfew, which is midnight. But Tom never did make it home that night. When his remains are found 2 years later, the rumor mill, which was already on full tilt, cranked up another notch. It's now been 9 years, and after radio shows, podcasts, articles, nearly every law enforcement agency you can think of, a local sheriff, and one private investigator, no arrests have been made, and everyone involved in the case has been the subject of suspicion at one time or another. But who is lying, and who is telling the truth? This is Tom Brown, A Killer Among Us, Part 2. Hey, y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potter. Welcome to Hitch to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends in Romania. Yep, let me see if I can flub through this one. Bine venit.
Very nice.
Who knows? We forgot to mention last week, and it's because Scotty wasn't around. He was upstairs because he got a pig snout. So he was guarding that somewhere in the house. But it
was guarding it.
It was our Scotty Gotcha Day. It was 4 years ago. Because we live in Kentucky, and we drove all the way to Rome, Georgia, and we rescued him from Rome, Georgia, and he's been ours ever since.
He was just out hanging out by the prison in Rome, Georgia.
Yep. Yeah.
He's just a little street rat.
Yeah, he's a good boy.
And now he lives on a pillow all day.
Two heated beds.
Heated dog beds.
3 heated beds. One up in your office, one down here in the studio, and one up in front of the window in the den.
Oh, my gosh. I'm telling you. And he eats homemade dog food.
We make his dog food every night.
He sleeps with us every night.
He is spoiled rotten.
He's made quite the turnaround.
Yep. He's got his own private backyard and a dog door.
I know.
Anyway.
We love our Scotty. We love our Scotty. Happy Gotcha Day, Scotty.
Yep, the little man.
Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitch to Homicide. Then like, rate, and review the podcast so other people who love true crime can find us.
Yes.
And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. If you want true crime with us every single day, please go join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Just go to Facebook and type in H2H. In-Laws and Outlaws, answer a couple questions you're in. Please answer the questions. I never know if you're a bot or if you're something or if you just didn't want to answer them. Just even if you say, I have no answer here.
Yeah.
Just so we know you're real. But go join.
Yep.
I love to post like photos. Everybody posts funny memes in there. We love those people. That's our family. Mm-hmm. You can find us on Instagram at Hitch to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And we have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee or Scotty another pig snout.
Yes. Yes.
You can find that link in our show notes. You can also send us a text. The link to that is at the top of the show notes where it says, send Chris and Rob a text. Mm-hmm. And I have one from Limestone, Tennessee. I found y'all's podcast. Love it. Love it already, Limestone, Tennessee. I found y'all's podcast 2 weeks ago, and I've been binging it. I went to our local library to get Chris's books, but they didn't carry them, so off to order for me. That's Tennessee for you, by the way. All my books are available to libraries. Thank you for being the most adorable couple in podcasting. Love your podcast. So, hey, Limestone.
Yep.
Email me. I'll make sure you get some books. Yes, how about that?
Cool. Yeah, our son lives in Nashville.
We like Tennessee.
Yeah, we sure do.
Well, when we left off last week, Tom Brown has been missing for months. disappearing on the night before Thanksgiving after being out with his friends.
Right.
The county sheriff, Nathan Lewis, and private investigator Philip Klein, who, according to Sheriff Lewis, thinks the sun comes up just to hear him crow, are both working to find the 18-year-old class president. But they're also working against each other along the way. By the way, Philip Klein thinks that the sheriff is incompetent and more worried about how things look than how they really are,
right.
i.e. he dresses well, he wears his cowboy hat and shaves his beard close, but when it comes to law enforcement, he's more Magnum PI than 357 Magnum.
He's all hat and no cattle.
Big hat, no cattle.
You got it.
But Lewis has called in the FBI. They are trailing lots of people, including one of the last people to see Tom on the night he goes missing, Christian Webb. Before I get started, let me thank some sources: the Canadian Record, ABC Channel 7, Amarillo, Texas, the Facebook group Moms for Tom, the Facebook page Klein Investigations, Texas Monthly, the Texas Tribune, Murder Under the Friday Night Lights, and Reddit.
There you go. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
The feds are tailing Tom's good friend, Christian Webb. She's a year older than he is, and while it should be Tom's senior year, it is Christian's freshman year at Oklahoma State. Now, just to remind you, her family owns the helicopter leasing and repair business, or something close to that. I'm kind of paraphrasing there.
Right.
And her father, Trey, and her brother went up in helicopters on Thanksgiving Day to look for Tom, and they actually spotted his red Durango at the water treatment plant.
Okay.
Christian has gone back to school at Oklahoma State, but the feds are trailing her at school. She knows someone is following her. And I don't think they were even discreet about it because they're like following her on campus wearing dark suits.
That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like a couple of Secret Service guys.
Men in black.
Yeah. These feds, they pick her up and they question her. Because after checking Christian's cell phone records, so they're into her cell phone records, right?
Yeah.
She was just one of Tom's friends and one of the last people to see him alive, and her family is the reason they found his truck in the first place, and they're into her cell phone. They've gotten a court order somewhere along the way to have her cell phone records.
Wow.
They see that she had been texting a lot with someone using a mobile phone in Denver, Colorado, named Nathan McGuire. Nathan was one of Macy Patterson's best friends. Macy was also in Denver at art school. And just to refresh your memory, Macy Patterson is the one who told police that she had discussed with Tom how easy it would be to disappear. Now, Macy actually introduced Christian to Nathan, and these two hit it off. But here's what the feds think is happening. They think Christian helped Tom leave Canadian Texas, and now Tom was actually using Nathan McGuire's phone to stay in touch with her, with Christian.
Okay.
And Christian tells them, no. And she hands over her phone to them and says, you can look through whatever you want. I am not talking to Tom Brown. I have absolutely nothing to hide.
Man, that would freak me out.
Yes.
God.
The feds show up. You're a freshman in college. They're following you around and they just show up. They keep badgering her, saying, you're not telling us everything. You know more. Tell us what we want to know. And she's crying. And again, a freshman in college. She's 19, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
And she's not with anyone else there to support her. Her parents aren't there. They're back in Canadian Texas.
Wow.
They ask her to submit to a polygraph, and she says yes. And then that is the end of that. They never gave her a lie detector test, and as quickly as they showed up, they were gone without so much as a thank you for your time.
What the heck and heck?
Yeah.
Wow.
So Christian calls her parents and says, I can't talk long because my phone's being bugged. I mean, she's like, I'm pretty sure my phone's bugged. And that night, when her parents are out to dinner, who do they run into? Sheriff Nathan Lewis and his family, and as you might imagine, Christian's father, Trey Webb, is less than pleased about what's taken place and how they've treated his daughter.
Sure.
And Sheriff Lewis apologized to Christian's parents, telling them that he understood she had nothing to do with any of it, and that they now knew that, quote, Thomas has run off with an older man to Colorado. He's somewhere in Colorado with an older man, end quote.
How do they know that?
Well, this is something that Sheriff Nathan Lewis has since denied saying. Christian's parents are like, no, he said it twice. That's why it was a direct quote.
It's like episode of Keystone Cops.
I'm telling you.
Wow.
Then they asked Tom's friend Caleb King to chat with the Texas Rangers and the FBI. When he said he hadn't seen Tom since November 23rd of 2016, that night before Thanksgiving, they tell him that they didn't believe him. And when they proved him wrong, they were coming for him.
Wow.
And you're done for. Again, this guy's a senior. He's 18 years old. He's being threatened by the Rangers and the FBI. We know you're lying, and when we catch you, we're coming for you, and you're done for, mister. I mean, it's pretty sad that because they can't make heads or tails of the case, they harass the kids who were Tom's friends. And I get what they're doing, but at the same time, these kids are only guilty of being Tom's buddy and being the last person to see him, the last people to see him.
Wow.
It's not like they have a record.
Right.
You know, they're not criminals. They're just kids.
Right.
By the summer of 2017, the case was going nowhere, and Penny, Tom's mom, calls herself a press conference.
Uh-oh.
Yep. It was standing room only. She tells everyone that Tom wasn't a troubled kid, that no evidence had surfaced that would suggest that Tom was leading a double life or that he was suicidal. He also wasn't a runaway risk. He wasn't living in Denver, Colorado. She tells the crowd that Tom was a mama's boy, and they were very close. And then she drops a bomb, saying that she had lost faith in the sheriff's office, that they were, quote, beyond frustrated with the lack of new evidence or leads garnered, end quote. Penny wanted answers.
Don't mess with Mama Bear.
And guess who showed up to the press conference and is standing in the back of the room? You got it, Sheriff Nathan Lewis. And everybody turned around to look at him. It's like that scene in Jaws where Quint runs his fingernails down the chalkboard.
Right.
Except Nathan didn't want the attention.
Yeah.
So when he gets it, he goes up to the podium and he says, we haven't forgotten about Tom. Quote, we haven't given up, nor will we, end quote.
Whatever, Nathan.
Well, he had to do that. I mean, she's up there bashing them, and he shows up for the press conference. He's at the very back. And, you know, everybody's turning around. What do you have to say about that, Sheriff?
15 microphones.
After this, Philip Klein, the private investigator, not to be upstaged by Penny or by the sheriff, goes back on the radio show and says, quote, we think it probably wasn't a premeditated situation. It was probably a situation where something happened. He ran into some friends or he ran into some frenemies or enemies that got out of control. Maybe it was a simple little fight between two people and one punch landed a death blow and then it had to be covered up. And without going into the evidence, I will say we have about 3 persons of interest that we are focusing on. We're trying to talk to these 3 young people and say, look, just tell us what happened. Just give us the information and tell us where he is, end quote.
Just like they did before.
Yeah.
God.
But he gives no clues as to who these teens are.
Yeah.
He said he was organizing a search of his own, but wouldn't say where. And this gets the trash toters. That's, if you don't know what a trash toter is, that's a gossiper. Gets them chin wagging all over again.
Pick a little, dog a little, pick a little, dog a little, cheep, 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 dog, dog. Sorry.
Exactly. Then in the early fall of 2017, Philip Klein says he's received an intriguing tip from a very fine young person, a relative to one of the main witnesses in the case. Philip says this person said to him, quote, I can't lie, I've got to tell the truth, end quote. The tipster claimed to have been told that Tom's body was somewhere near the same farm-to-market road where the backpack had been found. October 14th, 2017, almost a year after Tom goes missing, another search happens. The volunteers were divided into groups of 10 and stationed 1 mile in 1 mile increments apart. They worked their way through the woods, some of them on their hands and knees. And 6 minutes into the search, a woman yells out that she'd found something in the grass. It was an iPhone. The phone was in near perfect condition. It didn't look like it had been in the elements for almost a year.
I was going to say, after a year and it looks perfect.
It's been a year. And remember, when his backpack is found, it's seen elements. It's wet. It's been out in the rain. Right. You know, the computer was destroyed. It had been out there for a while. Right. When they find this phone, it's in near perfect condition. There was no dirt in the ports. My phone has dirt in the ports. Are you kidding me right now?
Yeah.
And it looked like it had only been there a day or two. It was bagged and tagged and given to a sheriff's deputy and then sent to the FBI forensics lab. The volunteers kept searching. They found some shreds of deteriorating clothes, a shoe, and an empty black pistol case that could have held a .25 caliber handgun, but no remains.
Okay.
Then Philip Klein went back on this radio show saying he'd received a tip about a brown Ford F-150 that was on the streets around the same time Tom disappeared. And then, and I think everyone is incompetent at this point because they finally do a luminol test inside Tom's Durango.
Just in the nick of time.
Just in the nick of time. Because remember, they took his car. They were like, yeah, we processed it. And then they bring it home.
Yeah.
And then they take it back again. And they're like, yeah, we're done with it. They bring it back again. No one's ever done a luminol test inside his Durango.
Wow.
And when they do it, Tom Klein arranges it. When they do it, it lit up like a Christmas tree.
Sure.
And again, I want to say he had the cadaver dog there that you know, sat.
Yeah.
And gave the sign that, you know, someone had died inside this Dodge Durango.
Right.
Well, why did they wait more time before they did the luminol test? So much just does not add up. And remember, in the last episode I told you on Reddit, it said, this case makes my head hurt. This is why. This is why.
Well, and the thing is, I don't think there's any conspiracy here. I think it's just incompetence.
Exactly. So again, the rumor mill is flying. Tom was killed and fed to pigs, a la Thomas Harris style in the book Hannibal. Mason Verger, he was like disfigured by Hannibal Lecter, who wants to have, and then he wants to have Hannibal eaten alive by these specially trained pigs he has. This is fiction.
Right.
But people are saying he's been fed to pigs. Then an inmate at the county jail told the sheriff, after calling him down to the jail, that Tom had been killed by a gay meth dealer he'd been stuffed into a wood chipper after having sex with him, which is Fargo.
Yeah, exactly.
There was one rumor that he was being kept in a cage in a vacant motel 20 miles outside of town where he was periodically shot up with heroin. One rumor said he'd been killed and then frozen in a freezer, like Goodfellas. Or again, like Fargo.
Yeah.
Still, the people in town are harassing these kids, Christian and Caleb and their parents. Small towns, man, they'll help you, but they love to gossip too.
Yeah. Yep.
Love to gossip. And if you've lived in a small town, somebody has said something so very untrue about you or your family. Mm-hmm. It's happened to me before. Has it ever happened to you in your town, your little town?
No.
Rob's perfect. No, I, of course, was probably a troublemaker. So
it never happened.
On January 12th, 2018, an FBI agent finally opens the phone that's been found. It belonged to Tom Brown.
Oh, wow.
So had someone kept Tom's phone hidden for a year, dropping it like in the area where they were going to search?
Yeah.
Philip Klein had kept the area where they were going to search a secret so people wouldn't go out there and mess up a potential crime scene wanting to be a hero.
Right.
The only people who knew where this search was going to take place were volunteer firemen and
Nathan,
the sheriff's department. Yeah.
Yep.
And who do you think Philip Klein thinks did it?
Nathan.
He thinks that Sheriff Nathan Lewis dropped that phone. And Klein said that Lewis had gone out of his way to be unhelpful. And when Klein wanted Chance the cadaver dog to sniff the backpack, Sheriff Lewis refused.
Really?
Yeah. They laughed at Klein when he gave them his theories. And Klein's thinking, I got to figure out who's involved in this from the inside. Because who is the sheriff covering for?
Sure.
And these two hate each other. They hate each other. Egos are actually keeping this poor kid's disappearance from being solved. The sheriff thought it was hinky that Klein wanted to search this one particular area where the pristine cell phone was found. But Klein pushed back, saying in his 31 years, he'd never been accused of planting evidence. And when he asked Nathan how in the world that phone could have been there, Nathan Lewis says, easy. Penny had the phone for a year and planted it there.
What?
Yeah. The sheriff is telling the private investigator that Tom's mom, Penny, had the phone for a year, and she's the one who planted it there.
For what reason?
Well, this was his theory because Penny had apparently texted Caleb King's mom and asked if Caleb or any of his friends knew Tom's 4-digit password to open his phone.
Oh.
So Nathan is saying, why would she need the password if she didn't have the phone?
Yeah.
And to this, Penny says that Nathan Lewis's boss, Sheriff Clapp, had called and asked her for the password. And she told him that she didn't know it, but she in turn asked Tom's friends.
Gotcha.
Clapp says he never asked Penny for the password, but it's Penny who says that's a lie. So there's so much finger pointing.
He said, she said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the fact remains, where did the phone come from?
Right.
After the FBI tells Penny that the phone is Tom's, she and the other members of a Facebook group that has been put together called Moms for Tom. It's a number 4. You can go to the Facebook group and it's open. You can read all of their posts. They posted an online petition demanding that state law enforcement take the case away from Nathan Lewis. 5,400 people signed it.
Wow.
There are only 2,230 people who live in the town of Canadian, Texas.
Jeez.
Yeah. At this point, even the sheriff had been a part of the rumor mill. It was said that Nathan Lewis had been involved in a sexual relationship with Tom Brown and that he'd murdered the teen in order to keep his life a secret.
Wow.
At this point, Nathan Lewis goes, Uncle.
Yeah, I'm out.
I'm tapping out.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Jeez.
And he turned the case over to the State Attorney General's Criminal Investigations Division. So in come Sergeants Rachel Kading and Chris Smith. They show up in Canadian, Texas and re-interviewed everybody all over again. They studied the sheriff department's reports, and immediately they say, someone is withholding information. Well, no shit, Sherlock.
Yep.
They make a short list of people that they want to take a polygraph. And on the list, who do you think's on the list?
Penny.
Penny, Tom's mom, is on the list.
Yep.
Also on the list,
Nathan.
The sheriff, Nathan Lewis, is on the list.
Yep.
They also want to polygraph Chris, Tom's stepdad, and his brother, Tucker.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
February 2018, it's 2 years later. Penny and Chris go to Austin, where the Attorney General's office is. Penny brought with her a binder with 11 pages of notes. It's her son's case from her perspective. And it all started on the night that Sheriff Lewis hassled Tom at the movie theater 1 year before he goes missing. Mm-hmm. The two investigators didn't tell Chris and Penny that they wanted them to take a polygraph. They saved it for the end of their meeting. And Penny and her husband both said, sure, quote, we have nothing to hide, end quote.
Yep.
A month later, they take their polygraph tests. Penny went first. They asked her the routine stuff. What's your name? Who's your son? They also asked her in between if she had been communicating with Tom and if she had moved Tom's body. She answered no. And after the test, it was concluded that Penny was withholding information. They come back into the room and say, quote, you know where he is. Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Then they say, quote, you moved his body. You're embarrassed that he committed suicide and you don't want anyone to know, end quote.
Wow.
Yeah. They'd heard the interview the day after the investigation where Penny floats this idea because of her father that he had possibly committed suicide. They never tell Penny why or how they believed Tom died by suicide or where they think Penny found Tom or hid his body. But they, according to Penny, were certain she was embarrassed and didn't want people to know. Penny says to them, look at me. I'm not even 5'5", and Tom weighed almost 200 pounds. He was 6 feet tall. I couldn't pick him up when he was alive. How could I pick him up if he's dead?
Right.
To which they said, quote, we think Tucker and Chris helped you, end quote. Her son and Tom's stepdad.
It seems like a big leap.
Yeah. Because there's no evidence whatsoever to support this theory.
Yeah.
Then they give Chris the polygraph, but Penny puts her foot down when it came to her son Tucker. She said that she wasn't going to put him through it. She was worried it would push him over the edge because, you see, Tucker is struggling with all of this. I mean, this is his younger brother.
Sure.
There are all these rumors circulating. All these things are being said. And even though Penny is taking it like a champ, Tucker, his brother, is not doing so hot with it. When Sheriff Lewis goes in for his polygraph, he's nervous. He's trying to clear his name. And when they ask him if he's involved in the disappearance of Tom Brown, he answers no. When they were finished with him, he too showed signs that he was covering something up.
Really?
Then Kading and Smith brought in P.I. Philip Klein. They were specifically asking him about planting the phone. And according to Klein, he passed every question. When he was done, he overheard one of them call him righteous, to which he said, quote, let me tell you something. Y'all need to pull your heads out of your asses. I'm tired of being treated like the bad guy here. I'm the good guy. My team and I are the good guys. I got people from all over the United States that are top in their careers. I don't have fly-by-night people that I hired yesterday and say, go investigate homicide. Then he walked out the door.
Nice.
He's like, get your head out of your ass. It's not me.
He actually dropped the mic as he walked out.
He kind of did.
Yeah.
But he is so arrogant. But you know how they always say when you have a surgeon that's an asshole, that's really arrogant, you want that surgeon. That's the guy that's the best surgeon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In October of 2018, Penny goes on Chris Sample's show. She goes on the radio show where she tells him that the Attorney General investigators don't tell her much, only that they're working on it. But they're not talking to Sheriff Lewis either, who said that he wakes up, quote, every day praying that something happens. I pray for the Attorney General. I want them to figure the mess out and get it dealt with, end quote. I bet you do.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Then on January 9th, 2019, Pine Gregory, one of Nathan Lewis's deputies, he's the guy who goes out the very first time.
Right.
He parks his car at the end of Lake Marvin Road, 12 miles from where Tom's cell phone had been found. He was on duty, but he took a break to go shed hunting. He's looking for antlers shed naturally by the deer because he collects them.
Okay.
And while he's out on this deer trail off the road by about 200 feet, he sees what looks like a white ball laying up under a thicket of trees. And he gets closer and sees that it looks like bone. And when he gets a little bit closer, he realizes it has 2 eye sockets and teeth.
Wow.
He hurries back to his car. He gets Nathan Lewis on the horn saying that he'd happened upon a human skull. It's been 2 years and 2 months since Tom Brown disappeared on Thanksgiving Eve. They found a femur, several small bones, a pair of tennis shoes, scraps of blue jeans. They found a Texas driver's license that had been chewed on by an animal, and the name read Thomas Kelly Brown.
Wow, so they found him.
They found him.
Wow.
They hold a funeral for Tom in the school gym. As you might imagine, it was all the talk in this little town. It was all they could talk about. There wasn't a funeral because Tom's remains, there wasn't a body,
right.
Because Tom's remains were sent to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification. They used dental records to positively ID Tom. There were no bullet wounds in the skull or the bones that they found, and there wasn't enough of him left for toxicology tests. There were no ropes or cords found with the body or around the body, and everything else had kind of disintegrated over the last 2 years and 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
That rumor mill is churning again in little Canadian Texas.
Yeah.
And people came from all around, and others chimed in on social media. Everybody had their theories. Then 2 weeks after the news breaks about Tom's remains, Jeff Castletine, the father of Michael Castletine, one of the 3 kids who'd gone out cruising with Tom on that faithful night,
right,
drove himself to the rodeo grounds and shot himself.
Really?
He committed suicide.
Wow.
Jeff was an elementary school teacher. He was nowhere near Canadian Texas on the night Tom disappeared. He was actually in Oklahoma City at a Carrie Underwood concert with his daughter. But the rumor mill was that Jeff had been in a secret love affair with Tom, and when Michael found out, he was so angry, he murdered his friend.
Wow.
Yeah. Then when the body was discovered, Jeff was inconsolable and shot himself.
Jeez.
But the truth was, Jeff suffered from bipolar depression his whole life, and he wasn't getting any better. He left a note saying he was sorry for hurting his family. Nothing about Tom Brown. He had nothing to do with it. But small town, rumor mill, everybody had to piece it together.
Sure.
The other kids didn't escape either. Christian Webb and Caleb King were always being pointed at and accused every time they came into town. The Chris Jones kid, the star running back who assaulted the classmate, he was eventually charged with armed robbery later in his life. He insisted he had nothing to do with Tom's death and volunteered to take a lie detector test to prove it because everybody was saying it had to be him.
Mm-hmm.
And what about Philip Klein? Well, Penny re-upped his contract, and he continued to go on the radio saying they'd unearthed, quote, nuggets, end quote, about the killer's identity.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Tom's friends, including Christian Webb, they don't think he committed suicide. And as an outsider, let's think about this. He had to walk so far away from his car to kill himself. Mm-hmm. And why leave the backpack somewhere else? And what about the phone in pristine condition?
Yeah.
None of the evidence makes sense. There are those who think Tom was trying to get to the same location where his grandfather shot himself in 1998. But Penny said she never talked to Tucker or Tom about their grandfather's death. She didn't think that they even knew their grandfather had committed suicide because she didn't want them to know.
Wow. In
July, 7 months after Tom's remains were found, the Attorney General's office and Sergeants Kading and Smith had an invitation-only meeting at the county offices in a town near Canadian Texas called Pampa. It's actually where Tom Brown was born.
Right.
Penny and her family were there along with some of the moms for Tom. Tom's father, Kelly. Kelly's pastor came with him. Philip Klein showed up with Jane Holmes, no relation to Sherlock, and Sheriff Lewis and a couple of his deputies were there as well as the Hemphill County DA and a Texas Ranger who had worked on the case. They began this meeting by asking everyone to remain civilized. There was to be no finger pointing. Sergeant Kading told the crowd that they were about to release a statement to the press announcing that the Attorney General's investigation was being suspended pending any new discoverable, credible evidence. They had no evidence to lead them to believe that Tom was the victim of foul play, and they had no legitimate suspects who would have a reason to harm Tom. Then Kading said that all the chatter and rumors on Facebook had, quote, complicated and compromised, end quote, the investigation. Quote, we don't know if he parked his car there at the water treatment plant and he walked all the way. We don't know if he was with somebody else and they dropped his car off there and laid him to rest where he was laid to rest. We do not have evidence that leans one way or another. He could have died from natural causes for all we know, end quote. Sergeant Kading said they also couldn't determine for sure whether Tom had died by suicide. They did say they had sent Tom's phone to a lab where technicians had discovered that around 9:45 on Thanksgiving evening, while he's out ripping and running with his friends, when he's with Christian and Caleb King, he had used his phone's internet browser to search, quote, suicide hotlines.
Oh, wow.
But there was no evidence that Tom had called any of the numbers from his phone. They also took shots at Phillips' investigation, criticizing his luminol test inside the truck. Analysis actually showed that it picked up yellow paint, not blood. Tom and some of his friends had painted wildcat paws on the road leading to the high school football stadium, and some of the paint rubbed off on their clothes and then onto the seats and the floorboards of Tom's Durango. And they said that there weren't enough cell phone towers in Canadian Texas to accurately triangulate anybody's location or pings in Canadian Texas. It was all guesswork.
Wow.
So I guess if you live in a small town, they can't triangulate you because there's not enough cell towers.
Yep. It's like I lived way out in the country, and my dad used to joke that we lived so far out in the country that they had to pipe sunlight back to us.
Well, that's Canadian Texas, apparently.
There you go.
Nathan Lewis, on the other hand, was relieved that the nightmare was over. At the meeting, Sergeant Kading said that Sheriff Nathan Lewis had not conducted an improper investigation into Tom's disappearance. Now, when this press release goes out, there was plenty of people and journalists who'd been covering this case who were pissed. Like John Mark Bellew, who used to write for the Amarillo Globe. Quote, how could you not come to the conclusion that Tom's death had to be foul play? The AG and law enforcement must think there's a whole lot of stupid in the Texas Panhandle and that we hitched a ride up here on the first turnip truck to believe this absurd conclusion, end quote.
I agree.
Even though Sheriff Nathan Lewis's name had been cleared by the Attorney General's office over his work on Tom's case, 3 months later, on November 15th, Nathan Lewis resigned as sheriff.
Really?
Why, you might ask?
Yeah.
Well, 2 months prior, in August of 2019, Nathan got a visit from the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, and they discovered that he'd fabricated some documents falsely detailing training hours completed by 3 deputies and himself.
Oops.
According to him, they did complete their training, but they incorrectly submitted their reports. Quote, I was just fed up with going through all this stuff and all the lies and all the rumors and social media. And so I just said, I'm done with this. I didn't sign up for this. This is ridiculous, end quote.
Wow.
And with all of this, the new rumor was that Philip Klein had new evidence that linked Nathan Lewis to Tom's death. And here's that story.
Okay.
Klein, he wouldn't identify who was feeding him an entirely new story about what happened on Thanksgiving Eve 2016. Allegedly, after saying goodbye to Christian Webb, Tom filled his Durango with gas, and because he had a few minutes left before his curfew, he drove to the parking lot of the high school football stadium where Canadian kids occasionally gathered. Klein said someone who wasn't there, he wouldn't identify that person either, sneaked up behind Tom, who was sitting inside his Durango with the window down. This individual pulled out a .25 caliber pistol and started, quote, messing with him, end quote. Klein said the person with the pistol had no desire to shoot Tom. He was just wanting to give Tom a little scare, but he accidentally pulled the trigger. The bullet entered through the top of Tom's neck and lodged in his brain. The bullet's shell casing landed on the truck's floorboard. According to Klein, Tom's killer pushed Tom into the back seat, drove out to Lake Marvin Road, dumped him under the thicket of the cottonwood trees, cleaned the blood from the Durango's interior, and drove back into town to find a place to stash the car. He finally found a spot on the outskirts by the water treatment plant.
Wow. There's a story.
Yeah. And that wasn't all. Quote, there's a possibility that some law enforcement may be involved in either the actual event or the cover-up. If it was not a law enforcement officer that actually pulled the trigger, it was somebody that's connected close to law enforcement who was willing to help clean up a mess, end quote. Later, Philip Klein will say that the law enforcement officer was none other than Nathan Lewis. The story unfolded more, and Klein said that there were two boys messing with Tom when one of them accidentally pulled the trigger. They panicked. One of them made a phone call to their father or a friend of his father's, and that adult called their close friend, Nathan Lewis. Mm. So again, a very wild tale, but no real evidence to prove Philip Klein's theory. Right. And why would Nathan Klein get involved? Remember, he's only been sheriff for 3 months.
Right.
And Klein's theory is that there was bad blood between, Nathan and Penny, Tom's mother, over the complaint about him in 2015. Mm-hmm. Nathan Lewis thought Klein's latest theory was funny, and that Klein, who touted himself as this great investigator, was just spewing nonsense. Nathan Lewis's theory, that Tom's mom, Penny, had something to do with what happened. Quote, she knows something. She knows so much about what's going on, end quote.
Jeez.
According to Penny, many folks in their town have ostracized her family. Quote, they just think that Thomas committed suicide and that we know it and we just need to get over it and move on. And in the meantime, we've ruined the sheriff and his family's life, end quote.
Wow.
She's moved away from saying that Nathan Lewis had anything to do with Tom's death. Quote, all I want is for the truth to come out. All I want is for someone to tell me what happened to my son, end quote. Mm-hmm. So will we ever know what happened to Tom Brown that night? Well, it's been over 9 years now, and this case is still ongoing. And Philip Klein of Klein Investigations and Consulting is still working for Penny.
Really?
At least as of February 17th of 2025, last month.
Wow.
Last year, Penny and her family sued the radio station and Chris Samples for having a private investigator on named Michael Crane. Yeah. Philip Klein says that he's a charlatan and a used car salesman who's falsely claimed he used to be a Navy SEAL. This lawsuit was dismissed last fall, saying that Michael and Chris Samples were entitled to their opinion, which was that Tom killed himself and that his family members tried to, quote, cover it up. Mm. Last November, Penny and her family sued the funeral home and Tom's dad, Kelly, over the skeletal remains of Tom, seeking a declaratory judgment to allow a forensic exam and DNA testing to be performed on Tom's remains prior to burial. According to Philip Klein's Facebook page, Chris and Penny Meek, along with Tucker Brown, filed a lawsuit and request for declaratory judgment against Boxwell Brothers Funeral Home and Kelly Brown. About a month ago, the remains of Tom Brown were released to Penny and Chris by the Office of the Attorney General in Austin, Texas. The Meeks, along with Tom's brother Tucker, went to the funeral home to make arrangements for Tom's private burial. During the meeting, Tom's mother, who had care and custody of the remains, informed the funeral home that before he was to be buried, they were requesting an examination of the remains and a DNA sample to be taken by an independent forensics examiner. And the funeral home and Tom's father refused to allow the examination and DNA test to be undertaken.
Why?
I think he just wants to put his son's soul to rest.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Okay.
But this entire matter has once again upset Tom's mother and family, and as the father, Kelly Brown, has, through counsel, blocked a separate examination from a team of specialized forensic examiners. The family's been told that the Office of the Attorney General has taken no position as they have released the body to the family and hold no control over that body. The case has been filed in Potter County, Texas, and if granted, the family will have the team of examiners conduct an examination of the remains as well as the photography as soon as possible so that Thomas Brown can be laid to rest.
Got it.
Now, since the Attorney General suspended the case in 2019, stating that there was no viable evidence of foul play, the case is not closed, and Philip Klein is still at work. There are lots of people who think that Tom did, in fact, commit suicide and his family covered it up because they couldn't handle it, and hiring Philip Klein is just for show. That's a lot of money just for show.
I was going to say.
Because I think his retainer, I read, is somewhere between $25,000 and $75,000.
Jeez.
And part of the reason I think is because there's an interview with Tom's mother, Penny. When she's asked about homosexuality, if Tom was gay, what would she do? And she basically said that it's a sin and she would want to talk to him about it. So if, and that's a big if, don't email me, I'm just trying to give all sides and opinions on this story. If he was gay and had this diaper fetish, he's already told his friends, the girls only, that he was ashamed of it. Did his knowing how his mother felt about homosexuality have anything to do with why people think he did commit suicide? The Googling of a suicide hotline that he never called? There are so many unanswered questions. And I hate doing cases that are unsolved, but God bless Tom, and I sincerely hope this family gets some closure at some point.
Yeah.
But that is the unsolved case and story of Tom Brown. And that's all I have to say about that. For nearly 7 years, Jane Doe has lived in the shadows, her past buried deep beneath layers of secrecy and silence. After completing more than was asked of her in her last assignment for the enigmatic Kaiwolf project, Jane Doe vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of dead bodies and unanswered questions. But now, as the specter of her past returns with a vengeance, Jane finds herself thrust back into a world she thought she'd left behind forever. When her former sins come knocking on her door, Jane is faced with an impossible choice: continue to hide in the shadows, or once again take up arms against the forces that threaten to tear apart the fabric of society. With enemies lurking around every corner and allies who may not be what they seem, Jane must rely on her wits, training, and her unyielding determination to survive. And while trust is a luxury she cannot afford, Jane must confront the truth about herself and her past. As the clock ticks, she realizes that the line between family, friend, and foe are razor thin, and in the end, the only person she can rely on is herself. Jane Doe 4 Charlotte is available September 24th, 2024. No name, no regrets, no mercy.
You know, there's a couple things about this case. The first one is that they had all these people out, you know, traipsing around and looking for him and things like that, and nobody came across the body, the bones?
Exactly. And it wasn't that far away from where other things were found. The other thing that bothers me is they had this CCTV footage of this Dodge Durango going up and down the road, and they're out looking for him. It's not that big of a town.
Yeah.
It's the middle of the night. How many people are out? They only have 2 stoplights in this town. Right. 2 stoplights.
Right. Well, the reality is that the only person that knows anything about this is dead.
Yeah. Only Tom really knows what happened.
He holds all the secrets.
He does. Wow. And bless his heart, and God bless him. I hope he is at rest.
Yeah.
And is not,
Yeah.
Walking this earth.
Yeah, exactly.
But what about all the other kids and I mean, there's just the finger pointing.
Yeah.
All the way up to the Attorney General's office.
Well, everybody was
in the state of Texas.
Yeah, everybody was shooting in the tent.
Yeah.
So
what does that mean?
They were all in the tent shooting at each other.
I've never heard shooting in the tent.
Yeah.
I guess meaning they're shooting and they can't get away inside the tent.
There you go.
Okay.
They're all trapped and they're shooting at each other.
All right. All right.
Anyways, okay, well, let's move on from that and do a little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right, number 1. I meant to do that.
Okay.
A 28-year-old Florida man named Justin McCall has been sentenced to 2 decades in prison.
20 years. Mm-hmm. Okay.
McCall already had a healthy rap sheet that reportedly included 13 separate crimes in relation to service of automotive burglaries before he shot himself during a burglary.
He was stealing cars and he shot himself.
Yeah. McCall ended up shooting himself in the leg with one gun he stole during one of his many crimes. The discharge of the gun was an accident and resulted in McCall asking the person he had just robbed for assistance. McCall is expected to serve the full sentence under the terms of the state's 1020 life statute, which mandates strict sentences for felonies committed with a gun.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, karma's a bitch, isn't it?
Yeah, that is karma. Yeah. That's instant karma right there.
There you go. Number 2, why do it just once?
Okay.
There's a 38-year-old guy in Fresno, California, who just got arrested for the 10th time in just 1 month.
What?
He was a busy boy because he's now facing 18 felonies and 15 misdemeanors related to stealing 6 vehicles and, to top it off, DUI.
Why are they letting him go?
I don't know. His most recent arrest was for stealing a truck. In addition, he's also facing charges for vandalism, fraud, possession of a controlled substance, and more. I don't know what more is, but...
18 times
good
more.
Lord. All right, number 3, and finally. Just a wrong turn.
Oh, that's me all the time.
Not like this. A 53-year-old woman tried to outrun the cops in Minnesota on Monday, and it didn't quite work out.
No, that's not me. I'm not trying to outrun cops.
Yeah, exactly. The woman was driving in an unsafe manner while making religious statements from a bullhorn.
The end is near. The end is near.
An officer says she drove through a red light and attempted to pull over, but then she fled. Another officer spotted her shortly after and she escaped again. But they caught up with her after she accidentally drove into a bunch of wet cement and got stuck. Oh. That's what I'm going to call this, a future hardened criminal. So there's your idiots for the week.
That's pretty good.
Oh my God.
I want to know if she eluded him twice before she ended up in the cement.
Just amazing.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs a blessing, all you got to do is go to hitchtohomicide.com. When you get there, there's a pull-down menu, and while you're there, you can also suggest a case. Yep. Or you can tell us about your brush with true crime.
Just do
Hopefully it's not ending in cement.
Oh, man.
That's my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.